Hey guys, thanks for coming back to check out another video. I almost had a palette drop out of my lap. That's what we used to do like last year. I don't know if I miss saying that. Do you guys miss it? I don't know. Either way, you are here today to see some eyeshadow pans. That is pretty relevant by the title, I would assume. I just thought it would be really fun to sit down and show you the eyeshadow pans across my collection. I have grouped the palettes together, like these are all the palettes with one pan, these are all the palettes with like 2 or 3 pans, things like that to get going. Let's see, what else did I want to tell you? I did just upload my like eyeshadow tracking video, I think last week around the 4th. But in that video I talked about like how I want to keep track this year and really like see what palettes I actually end up reaching for. And I thought it would be really fun. I did in that video include like my predictions for my for my top 5 reached for palettes. So I thought in this video, not only is it like eyeshadow pans, but quite obviously these must be some of the most used palettes throughout my collection because they have pan in them. I feel a little like bad because I keep giving you these eyeshadow palette videos with little like snack size little snippets into my collection. But I do plan on the 12th, I think, of January, which is a Friday. I know it's the second Friday in January. That's when I'm hopefully planning to have my eyeshadow palette collection video go live. So before we get into this and look at all the pans, I do have to ask you guys, I don't have any like structured plans for panning eyeshadow this year. And I'm wondering if there is something that you would like to see. Do you want to see pan those eyeshadows? Do you want to see pan in every palette? Like, let me know down below if there's any content that you are absolutely loving to gobble up right now, and if you would like to see it from me, because I'm kind of at a loss. As it stands right now, like I said, I don't have any like eyeshadow panning projects planned. Okay, so I think that was enough rambling. Let's get into it. These are all of my palettes that have one pan in them. So the first one that we will talk about is the Kaleidos Futurism 5, the Electro-Turquoise palette. I don't remember who said it. I think it was Laura. She said this is very reminiscent of like old school Taco Bell. Could not be more true. So I do have one pan in this, like I said. It is surprisingly the blue shade Tron right here. Which is, one, it's surprising because I really used to not play with very many color, let's be honest. So that's kind of surprising. But 2, it is actually my favorite shade within this palette. My second would be that Shockwave shade, that like icy one. It makes a really pretty inner corner highlight. I do like this palette. However, when I dip into this palette and I try to use more than 2 shades from it, I really feel like my look just does not look good. I think it's really the orange in here that throws me off personally, because that orange does not really blend well with the other mattes. It becomes kind of muddy, makes like kind of a green, you know, issue going on in your crease. So I do like this for like a companion palette, but yeah, it only has one pan is all you really need to know. Alright, so the next one is also a Kaleidos palette. So this is their Club Nebula palette that they did in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist. This was like a limited edition. It came out last year in January, and I absolutely love this palette. This is actually one of my like what I think will be one of my top 5 most used palettes for the year of 2022. I just absolutely love this color story. It is so pretty. I do have one pan in this shade Cylon as it sits here. I don't know if you can tell though, I do have some very good dips in some of these other shades and these 2 like matte darker shades up here. So I do think that if I, one, use this as much as I think I'm going to use it, I could just organically like hit pan that way. This is definitely, I don't know if I could like actually rank all of my eyeshadow palettes. That would be like an undertaking. But if I had to just rank my Kaleidos palettes, this is probably my top 1. And it's probably one of my like top 5 palettes within my whole collection. So I just absolutely love that. And I do want to get that one looking more used and loved. Alright, so the next palette that has one pan is my ColourPop Sailor Moon Pretty Guardian palette. I have pan right here in the shade Tuxedo Rose, I believe. It is probably the babiest of pans out of all of these. I think you can see it if I hold the palette like that. This is a great palette. It does lean to be on like the lighter, more like kind of pastel side, so I don't tend to reach for this palette during like the colder months, but this was a really fun palette during the spring. I would love to like bring this back out, do some more fun looks with it, especially even just coming into it and dipping into it for like the shimmer shades. They're all really pretty. So yeah, 1 pan in that one. And then the last palette that has 1 pan in it is actually from my Juvia's Place, the Tribe palette. I think this is still available. I know they go back and forth on, are they discontinuing this? Are they keeping it around? It's kind of frustrating. So the background of this is very reflective, and I apologize for that. But here, if I open it up, I'm gonna hold it back here so you can get like, just appreciate the color story first. And then this first shade right here, the like lime greeny shade, is the shade that I've pan on. But hopefully if I angle it, you can see like a lot of these other shades in here have good dips in them. So I really think, again, if this is something that I reach for as much as I have in the past, I think I could hit pan in a few more of these shades. The only 2 shades in here that I really don't like and don't even like full with when I dip into this palette are these last 2 here. Now there's nothing inherently wrong with this Curla shade, which is kind of like a red orange shimmer. It is really pretty. This is not my favorite kind of shade. I have fallen in love with red mattes, but red shimmers I'm still working towards, okay? But then this last shade, this sand shade, it is a really pretty like tealy green shade, but it is so underperforming. It is patchy, it's hard to work with, and it's hard to blend out. And luckily I have that color represented in other palettes throughout my collection, so those are 2 that I just don't really fool with. Alright, so I have 1 palette that has 2 pans in it, and it's actually my most expensive palette, and I wish that I could sit here and tell you it had more than just 2 measly little pans in it. But it's the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. Again, I think this one has finally been discontinued. It was a holiday release in like 2019, I think. But I don't know the shade names off the top of my head because they're on the little plastic insert. But I do have pan in this shade right here, as well as this shade here. So those 2 shades are also the like cream to powder shades. I'm sure you can tell that by like looking at the pan, like they look a little kind of grubby, like more so than like a powder eyeshadow would. It is her cream to powder formula. I think it's far easier to hit pan in those shades simply because they are cream to powder. I do really love that formula though. I think they make great shades to like lay down and then build a matte shadow up on top and really darken and deepen your look up with. So I would love to, again, this was one of the palettes that I have picked to be like, I will probably use this. This is going to be one of my most like top 5 used palettes in 2022. So I would love for this palette to look more loved, used, and abused, especially because it was so expensive. So that's just me putting that hope out into the universe. Alright, so I have 2 palettes that have 3 pans, 3 pans in them. So the first one, I'm waving it around here. It's the Menagerie Killer Purr palette. I think they always kill it with like the outside packaging on their palettes. It's just so cute. But if I open this up in here, I have completely finished off the shade Antelope. I have pan on this like matte army green shade, as well as pan on this main shade here. Now forever and a day ago, I did a video where it was swatching my favorite shades across all of my eyeshadow palette collection from A to Z. So if I'm not mistaken, this main shade was my favorite like M shade throughout all of my palettes. So I think it's really fun to now have pan in that shade since it was like a favorite. This Antelope shade was the perfect taupey gray kind of shade for my eyebrows. I know that sounds really weird, but it was just, I love it so much. So I have finished this off. I'm currently working on another one that's in a palette that we will get to, so I will show you. Once those 2 are gone, I'm going to see if I have any more like eyeshadows that meet that kind of gray requirement that I love in my eyebrows. But if I don't, I'm really considering just placing an order for a few of these Antelope singles just for that. But yeah, I do have 3 pans in this palette. Alright, so then the next palette that has 3 pans is the Festival by Juvia's Place. I love getting on here because some of these palettes I've like raved about in other videos and told you guys like, oh, these are some of my most favorite palettes. I really love getting on here and being able to show you that, yeah, they must be some of my most loved palettes because look at that. I do have pan in 3 of the eyeshadows. I have pan in the matte red, the like more hot pink, and then that more like mustard yellow. This is very similar to that main shade from the Killer Purr palette. This is my favorite, hands down, Juvia's Place palette. I think this is such an unsung hero in the like Juvia's Place lineup, and to me this is one of the most interesting color stories that they have ever done. I just really think this is a fun palette. I absolutely love doing the pink in my crease and then deepening it up with the red and making more of like a berry look. This icy white shade is great as all over the lid or an inner corner highlight. Yeah, I just can't sing the praises of this palette enough, and I think it's quite apparent because it has 3 pans in it. Alright, so I just have 3 more eyeshadow palettes to show you. They each have 4, 5, and 6 pans in them. You can probably, like, if you pause the video, I bet you can take a guess as to maybe what 3 these will be. So yeah, pause the video. Let me know what you think the 3 are. So the first one, it has 4 pans of eyeshadow, is actually the LORAC Pro Noir. I have always loved LORAC. I think that they make one of like my favorite matte formulas. Their shimmer formula has always been on the more like lackluster side in my opinion. But y'all, if you had that opinion about their old pro palettes, don't sleep on these new ones if the color story speaks to you. Don't just go out and buy something to buy it. But if any of these color stories speak to you, then you will not be upset with the shimmer formula that they have now. These are so much more impactful. They have greatly improved it, and their mattes are still really nice and like blendable like they always have been. So if I bring it in so you can see, I have completely finished off this first shade, which was just a standard Haley cream shade. This shade next to it has pan on it. Hopefully you can see. This shade here, which was a brown shade, has pan on it. I was using this in my eyebrows, but it's a little too chocolatey for my taste. And then I do have pan on this shimmer shade here. I don't know. You know, we might just have to be taking my word for it. I don't know if the ring lighting is like throwing that off too much because it is a white shade with like the pan and everything. It might just be a little hard for the camera to register that. But yeah, that's 4 pans of eyeshadow within this palette. And this is one of my more like newer palettes to my collection. So it just makes me really happy to see that it's already so loved looking. Now granted, I could stand to like use more of this palette. Like some of these darker shimmer shades down here haven't really been touched. But overall, I really do enjoy this palette. Alright, so my palette that has 5 pans in it. Actually, let me just say this. These next 2 palettes that I'm going to show you are palettes that I contemplated panning at one point, and I believe I'll link that video up here and down below just so you can see it because that was months ago, and it's really fun to like see just how far they've come. You know, like they've gotten a lot more use. So the palette that has 5 pans in it is my Persona Identity palette. I have the old packaging. I know that they have updated this. And I'm just going to say, if you are the type of person who doesn't like to look at dirty eyeshadow palettes, then skip ahead because the packaging of this gets quite beat up and grubby. But I honestly love it because, again, that just makes it look more loved within my collection. So the first thing I do want to point out is I did accidentally drop this palette. It was sad. So when I dropped it, this like bottom portion of shadow on the Fearless shade did kind of crumble out. And so it looks like I have pan there when I don't. I also have brown eyeshadow all over my hand because it's all over this palette. Yeah, so then the other thing, when I did drop it, this Seductive shade, which was my favorite shade in the palette, I had pan on that, and I had actually used up half of this eyeshadow. When I dropped it, it unfortunately shattered and crumbled out all over the floor. So I was really upset. It was one of those moments where I was so stressed out about other things, and I dropped this palette and my favorite shade crumbled out that I cried about it. And my husband was like, well, let's just go to Ulta. Let's just replace this palette, which was very sweet of him. But I was like, no, I still just want to keep this palette and love it. So yeah, I'm still giving myself credit that I at least had pan on Seductive, maybe not necessarily finished it off. But like I said, I had hit pan on it and then cleared out half of the eyeshadow before dropping it and losing that shade. So if I bring it in closer though to where you can really appreciate it, the cream shade Humble, I had used up, finished. This shade right here, I'm not quite sure of the name of it, but I do have pan on that shade. This shade is a really pretty, like, it's sassy. It's a really pretty inner corner highlight as well as like a face highlight, and it does really wear nicely as like just a lid shade. We've already talked about Seductive, and then the other two, I have Maverick here, which you can see there's just very little product left in here. This is my current eyebrow powder that I love. It's just that perfect like taupey gray shade, which I know sounds really weird. Like, why would you want to wear that in your eyebrows? But I love gray eyeshadow for my eyebrows. I just think it looks the best. So like I said, once this one is gone, I don't know what I'm going to turn to, if I'm going to have to order more of the Antelope shade or what. And then the last shade in here that I have pan on is the shade Chic right here. This is a great shade for like the outer lid area. I am really surprised that this Charming shade, I don't even think it has a dip on it. Every time I use this palette, I use that Charming shade because some of these other mattes in here are so dark that it's nice to go in and start off with this very light khaki brown, and then you can really blend out those darker mattes much more easily. So I would say that I've used this Charming shade like 100+ times, and it's still no dip, or you know, it has a little bit of a dip, but no pan to be had. So but yeah, I am really excited that this is one of my most like panned palettes because I do always sing the praises of this and say that I really love this palette. I guess I kind of spoiled the palette with the most pans. It has 6 eyeshadow pans. This is the ABH Jackie Aina palette. I did, before I took my hiatus, decide like I'm gonna pan this palette, and then life happened and Haley didn't pan the palette. So I don't know how I feel, if what I want to do, like I said earlier, but I do still really love this palette. I think this is probably the one of the best. I haven't tried them all, but this is, out of the ABH palettes that I have tried and owned, this one is my favorite. This one is the best. I am not sure if you can still get this palette. It was on sale like a while ago. I think they're like running it out the door, but I don't know. Either way, if I bring it in here, I do have pan on 6 of the shades. So I have pan on this pink shade Supreme. I have pan on, no, I don't have pan on that shade. I'm lying to you. I have pan on this brown, which is Credit, and then this like taupey silver kind of shade. Not one of my favorite shades in the palette. And then on the bottom row, I have pan on the purple Shookington shade. This shade is, it's called Trust Issues. It's a white shade. It's like a topper shade. I think right there you can see the pan, but it's going to be quite hard for the camera to register that one. And then the last one that I have pan on is the green shade, Sponsored, which is my favorite shade throughout this whole palette. So yeah, this one is definitely looking very loved, and I think you can tell if I bring it in again. Maybe I do have quite a few good dips on some of those other matte shades, especially this pinker and big wig shade. So I'm excited to see what this palette will look like by the end of the year. But yeah, that is it. That is all of my like eyeshadow palettes that have pan in them. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!